welcome everyone to the From the Shadows podcast. I am your host, Shane Grove. And before we get started with this week's episode, I want to remind everybody that if you can't get enough of the From the Shadows podcast, and let's be honest, who can? You just can never get enough. Go visit our website at fromtheshadowspodcast.com. You can find links to all of our social media where you can join our Facebook pages, follow us on YouTube, Instagram, everywhere, even TikTok, where I don't do any singing or dancing unless maybe if we get 10,000 followers, I'll do some singing and dancing on a TikTok video. So there you go. Everybody listen, go follow us on TikTok because I want to do some singing and dancing. So if you want to get a hold of me, hit the contact button on that website and you can send me an email, especially if you want to share a story or an experience you had and maybe come on the show and tell all of our listeners about it. We'd love to hear from you. I will read it. I will answer you. If you've got something you want to share, hit the contact button and send me an email. You can also find me at Shane Grove Author on Instagram. Send me a message there if you want to get a hold of me. So with that being said, I have to do a promo for an event that relates to our guest. So you guys have heard us talk about the Mohegan Bigfoot Festival that's going to take place in Loudonville, Ohio on September 20th, which that time of year in that part of the state of Ohio, it's usually beautiful. I don't think there's an Ohio State game on TV, so there's no excuse for sitting at home and watching them play Marshall or Eastern Kentucky or whoever the Buckeyes are playing the third or fourth week of the season. So come out. There's going to be vendors and stuff set up outside downtown, and then there's a whole list of speakers and events going on in the Ohio Theater downtown. And our guest today is going to be speaking at 11:30 in the Ohio Theater. We're going to be on, me and the judge are going to be doing a live podcast, recording a live podcast at 2:30 in the theater. Phil and Nita will also be there hanging out so everybody can stop by and say hi. Now, I say we're going on at 2:30 unless our guest, Rob Rodabaugh, right? I got it. Yes. Rodabaugh. Rob Rodabaugh. I always get nervous with last names that I can pronounce ahead of time. But unless Rob gets on at 11:30 and just brings the house down, we may be too embarrassed to come on and follow. So Rob, welcome to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm glad to have you on to share some of your stories and experiences. And how excited are you for this very first Mohegan Bigfoot Festival?
It's going to be fun. Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I've not done one of these before, so.
Ooh. Okay. All right. The other people on the list, we have Mark Maisel's going to be there. Larry Sidell. How do you say his name? Sidwell. Okay. Gosh, he's going to be mad. B. Mills is going to be there, and Matt Pruitt, right?
Yep.
And then, so it's going to be a fun afternoon of all things Bigfoot. We promised Suzanne we wouldn't talk about anything else, but it's going to be all things Bigfoot. See, Suzanne's going to be listening to this. She's going to be like, "Oh, don't say." Anyway, but no, we're all excited. It should be a fun afternoon. If you're listening to the show, you can go on our social media. You can find a place to buy tickets. You can find a link to the festival site. You can see the lineup. So come out, say hi to us, say hi to Rob, say hi to everybody, and it should be a fun time. So with that being said, Rob, let's tell the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're at in Ohio, and like, why on earth would the first Mohegan Bigfoot Festival have a guy like you as one of the speakers?
I'm cheap.
I'm cheap. I love it. I love it. Well, good. Hey, a little bit of secret. Me and the judge are pretty cheap too.
Yeah. So I'm over in Hancock County, Ohio, over in the Black Swamp area. Not a lot of the investigators are looking in this quadrant of the state, but there are reports over here, believe it or not. So I'll look at them, I started getting into Bigfoot events back in 2016. Went to a Bigfoot night hike in Salt Fork and met Mark Maisel that night. And it's kind of went downhill from there, I guess. But no, that event, my daughter and I went down to that and we enjoyed it. We found out that those guys that were involved, Alan and Jesse, the Fathom Frontiers guys, the guys that made the Pack 80, helped tell Suzanne's story. Those were the guys that were doing those night hikes, and they also had started doing Bigfoot Adventure Weekends. It was kind of a family oriented event. So we went to that. We hit COVID messed up one of those, but we basically hit the rest of the Bigfoot Adventure Weekends until Alan and Jesse moved to Colorado. And then, having met Mark, David Wickham, through those guys, I was able to kind of stay involved in those night hikes. Got to help out with some of the night hikes at Salt Fork later on. And Dave especially was encouraging, like, if I was interested in this, I should look into going to an expedition. And he had recommended Charlie Raymond down in Kentucky. He said those are good expeditions. So I got signed up for one of those. Went to my first one in the fall of 2022. It was November 2022. And the expedition that I'm going to be on the week before the Mohegan Festival will be my 11th. So,
holy smokes!
Yeah, I got the bug pretty bad after I went to the first one, and that, it was mentioned to me like this. It'll change your life. It kind of has. I've met some of my favorite people in the world out who was looking for Bigfoot. So, I'm definitely an enthusiast. I've been interested since I was a kid, I guess. It was always more interesting for me to believe that there's a possibility that these things exist, whatever it be, the ghosts, the Loch Ness Monster, the Bigfoot, whatever it be. The world's just more interesting place to me. Consider that maybe those things are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a guy that likes to go see. So, as I continued going to the expeditions and meeting the investigators and kind of getting more involved, I became an investigator for the BFRO in October of 23. So What's interesting is once I got into the database, I'm just like, wow, there's stuff not very far from here. It's at least, someone has put in some kind of a report. And there are, I don't know the exact number right now, active BFRO, around 400 probably. There are like 70,000 reports. So, and it's kind of a volunteer organization, there's just so much to sift through and follow up on. And,
So there's 70,000 reports for the United States in the BFR?
Like the United States and Canada. It's pretty incredible, to see what's out there that's sitting out there that needs follow up, or there are things that we can't, like over in this area in particular, some of them that I've looked into, I can't really go off of. We heard some sounds that, it sounded like what you would hear on the Bigfoot TV show. It had to be a Bigfoot. There's a lot of things out at night that make noises that would surprise people if you aren't out there very often. Everything's not Bigfoot. I would like to be able to chase that further when somebody feels like they've had those experiences, but they're fleeting, okay, you heard a noise that you thought might have been, but we don't have any other evidence at all. It came from over there somewhere. Those are hard reports to do anything with. So there are a lot more reports in the system than we would publish.
So when you say 70,000, is that 70,000 that have been published?
No.
Or
no,
so 70,000 are what you guys have in the database, and some of those are just like you said, like I heard something.
Yeah,
and
you've heard of the class, class A's, class B's.
Mm-hmm.
Those are more what we're going to gravitate to and try to publish. Some of the other stuff is just, there's not enough. The other thing that's been really interesting to me is some of the local history and lore that has come out that I didn't know about. Or people finding out, oh, you're into Bigfoot. Have you heard about this? I've gotten a lot of really interesting information that way. People that are just, once they, they're not as guarded about some of the things they might want to talk about when they find out that I go out looking for Bigfoot. I don't really.
Yeah, if they share something with you, you're going to listen.
Yes.
and be, for lack of a better term, a sympathetic ear. You're not going to say, "Oh, you're crazy," that you just are imagining things or anything like that. You're going to actually be somebody they can talk to it about, and they may not have met anybody up to that point that they could honestly, seriously talk to it about.
Yeah. And I'm at a point, in life that I'm ridicule isn't going to bother me. I'm doing something that I think is interesting. So, I'm not really out to necessarily try to convince anyone of anything. I want to understand, and especially with this area of the state, this quadrant of the state. I don't think that there's necessarily a population that lives here and stays here all the time, but there's enough reports that have, sporadically happened across this part of the state that something is happening, that they're passing through. I'd like to maybe be able to connect some of the dots of where were they coming from and where are they going. I would say with a high amount of certainty that most of the reports that are in the database are near water, rivers, streams. You've heard about the recent up in Monroe, Michigan. The father and son were fishing. They had an encounter. There's the other thing that has kind of happened in parallel with the Bigfooting stuff for me has been getting out on the rivers and doing a lot of kayaking and canoeing. And that's given me a firsthand view of, I'm 100% certain that this is one of their means of egress. I have, in the last 2.5 years, almost crossed the entire state of Ohio in a kayak. And the majority of those miles, I didn't see a human being. If I really was trying to hide, and I could have avoided all of them. And that to me is pretty interesting. Rather than, we've sat around fires and talked about it. I've actually went out and kind of proven to myself that, well, this is what I would do. I mean, because I can do it. I can do it in the daytime almost. But beside it, seeing the state from the river is like a completely different landscape, completely different world. People would be amazed. I was. And I put in over 220 miles last year on the rivers and lakes in Ohio. And the intersections with abandoned rail beds, power line cuts, pipeline stuff, it's those are the highways, in my opinion. Because it gives an easy connection to the next river or what have you. And most of those are isolated enough that you can, I'll even say in Northwest Ohio, out here in the farm country, if I was trying to move across Northwest Ohio, I'd walk right down the middle of the country road. You can see a car coming for miles.
Mm-hmm.
Step off, hit the deck, or step into the corn, whatever. It's easy. And that's one of the things when I got out and started following up with some of these reports and getting out into some of the locations, I can find, I can say, well, they probably, they were probably following the river. They came up this rail bed. There's starting to be able to see those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, even though some of the reports that are in the system that just don't have enough information to really dig deep into, or to really get a full, where you're going out, you're making measurements and trying to figure out how big this thing was. And, even the ones that they just heard something, or I'm pinning those, with enough information that just maybe eventually something will come about that'll help connect the dot. Like, oh, this also happened around that time. That makes this shaky report a little more plausible.
Mm-hmm.
If there was, in that same timeline over here, not very far away, there was a little bit better action. You know what I'm saying? So
yep.
Those are the kind of things that I'm hoping eventually I'll be able to connect some of those dots and start to have a better understanding of maybe where are they coming from and where are they headed. I have some loose ideas now, but I don't want to pretend that I'm on top of it at this point, because there's still too much to look at.
Well, I think, because it always it surprises a lot of people when you talk to them and they kind of, everybody thinks Ohio is just flat farmland and that's it. Okay. Well, they don't realize that the eastern part of the state, if they've never been there, is Bigfoot Central. I mean, it is hills and woods and dense and, whatever. But you are actually in the part of Ohio that a lot of people that have never been here picture Ohio. Flat farmland with woods. So where do you, and I'm not going to hold you to this. I'm not going to say, if it gets proven otherwise, I'm not going to say, hey, look, Rob said this. Okay. So where do you think, because obviously on the eastern side of the state, that is topography, an area that you could imagine a family units living, never being seen. They would have places to live, breed, eat, and be alone. If they're ending up in the northwestern part, or even just the western part along the Indiana border, where do you think they're coming from if they're not actually staying here long term?
I'm not positive. Michigan, there are parts of Indiana that are a lot better habitat than one would think as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I that's the part that I mean, it's too early for me to try to say this is where I think, are they coming down through from the north? Are they coming? I don't know at this point. I don't want to even try to pretend to.
Hey, you big chicken! No, I'm just.
Yeah, I don't want to.
But it is. It's very curious when you look at that and you're like, so, because to me, if I'm living in Michigan, I'm staying in Michigan. It might. I mean, can you imagine walking from Michigan to, say, you're going to Kentucky?
Right. Well,
that's a haul.
I mean, it happens with some of the other big mammals. The males are kind of shoot off to go find your own way, and I think maybe that's some of what it probably is. And maybe even some of it is food or water,
Mm-hmm.
at certain times of the year. Maybe they would be more likely to be around like an Indian lake type place that is going to absolutely have water when some of the creeks and all those things are drying up in the late summer, So it's still for me too early, but it's interesting to me to see how much there has been. And the landscape has changed over the years too. Like I talked about some of the abandoned rail beds and stuff, 30 years ago, those were live. Some of those have been, the farmers have kind of taken over, and you can't even tell there was anything ever going through there. So there have been some changes, and some of those reports are from some of those areas that have changed.
Okay.
So those are harder to, as well, there's a development here now. It used to be a woods, but there are, some of that is out there. It's just, it's again, like I'm wanting to try to connect dots, because I do think that I think there's going to be some common denominators. There's going to be either in route. I think it's because it's going to have to do with those means of egress, the rivers, or those power line cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Some easy way for them to get through without being seen.
So once you got into looking at reports, what were some of the reports that really, from the past, that really, were there any that really stood out to you to the point where you're like, boy, I wish I would have been able to go investigate that one?
The one, I mean, I'm working one that if I have to play long game, I'll play long game. Like I'll wait. There's a witness I want to talk to that doesn't really want to talk about it. I've talked to the wife, but the particular report that I'm most fascinated by, she didn't see. She was with him. He was driving. She didn't see it, but he almost wrecked. I really want to have that conversation about what he saw. About a week later, the wife saw something that pretty much matched up with everything that he described in maybe about a quarter mile from this same location. So that one to me is a really interesting one. I really want, I hope that the day will come where we can have a good conversation about that. I understand people not wanting to bring any attention or anything, and we can always keep all of that, private, but, I'm willing to listen, it's not, you're not crazy. A lot of people see these things. And the more people will agree to talk about it, I think that's going to help us understand and keep connecting those dots. And, there's probably, think about how many people have seen something and haven't reported it to anyone, haven't said anything to anyone.
said there's 70,000 reports. Okay. So that's probably a quarter, a sixth. I mean, there's got to be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sightings, or, people heard something that nobody has reported. Okay. So think about this then. Wes on Sasquatch Chronicles has interviewed 3,000 people. I've interviewed maybe 300 Bigfoot eyewitness. I mean, the whole collection of all of us guys and girls that talk to Bigfoot eyewitness probably haven't even talked to 5,000 people. So we're not even scratching the surface of eyewitness testimony that has come forward to let alone file a report with the BFRO, but then to come and talk about it on a podcast or a TV show. I mean, that's here I thought I could retire pretty soon, but I'm like, there's a whole lot of people left to talk to. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. I think there's a good number of people that potentially have something to tell that just don't have any idea how to go about finding somebody to tell. And that hopefully is something that will happen kind of organically at the festival.
Yeah.
It is a cool thing when people can come together and sort of feel like, okay, it's safe here to talk about these things. I remember back, a guy that I worked with, like I told you, the ridicule part, like years ago, I was way past that. Like, it doesn't matter to me, regardless of what anybody thinks. What am I doing wrong? Being out in the woods, regardless. But I didn't care. I'll talk about it. There were a lot of people that were appreciative of, oh man, you're into this stuff. Like, I'm really into this stuff, but I didn't have anybody to talk to about it with, So it's been fun, and I think that will happen. There will be some of that will come about at this festival. Maybe give some of those people an avenue to find the right person to talk to. It happened with Suzanne, so it'll be, I think there will be more. There will be people that will want to talk that haven't talked to anybody yet at this event. So yeah, there's a lot of it out there. And like you were kind of saying, if just a fraction of those are legit, then there's something, there's something. So,
well,
I'm going to keep going out and trying to find out until I'm satisfied with either one way or the other. Like, either there's nothing out here, or maybe I'll have that moment where, it removes all doubt.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask is, so what, other than, the camaraderie and going and getting out in the woods, like, have there been things that you experienced out on some of these expeditions that really opened your eyes and made you think, okay, there's something out here that I can't explain and I want to find out more?
Yeah. That's why in the past, since late 22, this will be my 11th expedition. I can't, I can't say with 100% certainty that anything that I have experienced was Bigfoot, uh, was a Sasquatch. I didn't see it, but I have experienced knocks that were just phenomenal. It very much seemed like there was intelligent signaling happening. And there seemed to be a sentinel up on the ridge. There were at least three, and it was really cool. Like, it was just, you hear stories, but then when it's actually, and sometimes you'll hear things that was that something. When it is what they talk about, it's kind of, it'll set you back a little bit. Like, oh, like that's what they're talking about. You've heard people talk about a home run knock. That was one night in Kentucky. It was incredible, to have that happen and that close, and it was intense, and there were other, like, it was a series of things with the knocks. And, I had, in Kentucky, I had in one of the other locations, something come up through the woods. I could hear it. That's what woke me up. It was early in the morning. I could hear something approaching the tent, and it came right up to the tent. I could hear it breathing. It was big, whatever it was. And at the time, I had a 75-pound German Shepherd, and whatever was outside the tent was way bigger than that. Like, this was big breathing. I didn't get to see it. I don't know what it was. It had my heart pumping for sure. My screen, the front of the tent was open. I kept thinking, man, I'm going to get to see it. All it has to do is step in front of the tent. It never did. It'd walk up to the edge, and then it would circle back. And it kept pacing along side and back of the tent. It shook the tent 4 times. And
what? Holy smokes.
It was intense. It was, I was rattled. I don't know what that was, but it was something. It was something big.
Well, you know what it wasn't. It wasn't a squirrel. It wasn't a,
Yeah.
it wasn't a chipmunk. It wasn't a skunk. It wasn't a, I mean, that's the thing, is there's only so many things it can be.
Yeah. I don't know. And I'm not going to stand up and tell everybody, I had an encounter. But I had an encounter with something. I just don't know for sure what it was.
Smokes. Wow. So did you, so your heart's racing, but did you fear for your, because obviously you're laying there and you believe probably in that moment, this is a Bigfoot, and how big this, whatever this is. Are you thinking at any point in time, like, this thing could just reach down, ball me up in this tent like I'm an old piece of chewing gum and toss me, you know?
For me, it was more, I I started thinking, man, I'm gonna have to fight something. I don't, like, is it a bear? I didn't know what it was, and I did have some food in the tent, and I was thinking, man, I'm gonna have to fight something. um, I kept looking at I was watching the tent. I was I've heard stories of them pressing. The tent shook pretty hard, and I was looking for whether I could see something grab the poles or something. Like I wasn't seeing any of that. The the tie downs for the rainfly I just had them hanging. And when we were kind of scoping everything out after it happened, that's pretty much something was grabbing onto that and yanking on those. Mark Mazel was with me when we went up there, and he started yanking on that, and it was exactly what was happening to the tent. I was just like, that's what about it.
Yeah, so there was probably a bear, because bears grab stuff with their opposable thumbs and do that. So.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't know what happened. I don't know. I mean, there was after the fourth time it shook everything. It vocalized, or at least it started out audibly making it was making a sound like almost a hum type of and then I had a really strange sensation of, it was like ringing in both of my ears, and it converged on me and got really intense, and I felt like my eyeballs and my brain was shaking back, like inside my skull. So that made me, I was scared, thinking, what, am I having a stroke? What is happening to me? I don't know what's going on, but this is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. And then that let go of me, and I couldn't hear the breathing anymore. Couldn't hear the walking back and forth. I laid there for like 10 minutes. Didn't silent, just thinking, is it still standing right here? And then finally I decided, okay, I'm just gonna come roaring out of this tent. And there was nothing there. So I don't know what that was.
All I could think about is you coming out of that tent and being involved in the forest version of whack-a-mole. Like, oh my goodness. It just, that right there, without physically seeing it, that's one of the most intense experiences I've heard in a long time. I mean, that is
I mean, it was intense. It was, there was a lot of adrenaline. It was intense. It rattled me because like I said, I thought, I'm going to have to fight a bear or something. Like, I don't know what's out here, but It's
Wow.
bigger than what I would choose to wrestle with by the sounds of it, you know?
Wow. Wow. Okay. That's so did like where you were camping, were there other people camping nearby?
The closest the closest tent to me was about 40 yards away.
Okay.
I had gotten there kind of late, and most of the people that were camping were all kind of gathered up down in the lower part of the campground. I was thinking, hey, I'm going to go out on the edge of camp, you know, if something's going to come snooping around camp.
You're like
Pick me.
the one time you were right, and there it is. Holy smokes! Okay, so that happens. That has to really get you like fired up. Like, okay, I got to find out what this is. Like, has there been other events similar to that, or?
That was that was the one that probably amped me up the most. My takeaway from that was, because there was a few people in the aftermath, you know, I told the story. I told a few people what happened. We kind of went up and looked. We did find an older impression in the trail that was heading down to the water. There wasn't anything. It was old. It wasn't in the substrate up there. There was wet leaf litter, and the ground was so it's so rocky, and like prints are almost. That happens a lot too. You know, the substrate is just not conducive to leaving very good sign sometimes where we're at, you know. But yeah, there was some speculation of whether or not that rattled me enough that I was going to pack up and leave. My takeaway was more of it, whatever that was, it didn't hurt me. So maybe it's going to be a bad thing, because maybe I'm less, you know, I have less fear now. Like, okay, something walked right up, like was feet from me through nylon tent. I'll go back. I mean, I'd go camp by myself in that same area, just see if something else would happen, you know?
Well, and it makes you wonder what is in their DNA, or their collective DNA, or their experiences that they've had and been able to relate to one another, that, hey, it's okay to go up to the tent, sniff around, and shake it a little bit. But whatever you do, don't go in the tent. Don't try to drag the guy out of the tent, because you might get shot. Or there might be, you know, there's 10 other tents down there, and they might come out. Like, there has to be a certain amount of intelligence or learned behavior that tells these creatures, you know, where they can go right up to the line, so to speak, because it doesn't seem like they're really too like they don't really want to hurt somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's high likelihood that that species is going to have an array of personalities, just like people. There's probably some that are cantankerous and There's others that probably are, pretty peaceful. In general, I don't think that there are a lot of, or at least where I have been looking, aggression is not a big part of it. Unless, of course there's stories out there where, like Ape Canyon,
Yeah.
but that was antagonized,
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
So
before we wrap up here, I want to ask you about Northwest Ohio again. And what is it other than this one, that you described, which, by the way, if they saw like a week apart, if the husband and wife had a sighting a week apart, that almost makes you believe that whatever they saw might be hanging out.
yeah, this is an older report, but what is really interesting, I started to tell you about kind of pinning these.
Yeah.
And I also, when we were out on the Scioto River in July of 23, before I was an investigator, before I had been in the database, we found an impression on the riverbank that was, again, I don't know. I know what it looked like, but it was cartoonishly big. We were making jokes about it. Like, hey, look at this. I'm going to take a picture, show the wife. We found a Bigfoot print. There were some things that the riverbank was higher than my head behind me. This would have been like a right foot, and then the next step would have been river. And the brush up on the bank was all smashed out, like something did come through there. That this is one of those that I'll always kick myself for. I didn't go. I could have scanned. Yeah, I did take some pictures of the print. I could have 3D scanned it. Had my phone. I mean, I could have climbed up on the bank and seen what else we might have found there. Didn't do any of that. Like I said, we were making jokes about it. Like, this is cartoonish. Like, there's no way. Like, this is, well, that was in July. I pinned that just in case. When I got in the database in October, 9 days before we found that, back the river, basically, there was a report. So, and then the other report that I'm talking about, there's a straight line on the map of where these things happen. So I'm gonna say at this point, I feel like this is a path.
Yeah, that would make sense.
When you start being able to, you back up and you start looking at this on a map and saying, wow, like maybe what we found was something. There was another report that was put into the database 9 days apart from when we found that, in a very plausible route in between the two places. So interesting stuff.
Indeed. Indeed. So I like your approach. You're very thoughtful about what you're doing. I like the fact that you're because I'm me and the judge and some other people, we've talked of the whole deal about the rivers and but like you said, you've actually gone and seen it, for yourself to see how remote those places are, which I'm sure people listening to us from all over the world, that's probably something they could go do wherever they're at, in whatever state, whatever country, and just get in the rivers. And
I encourage it. And I mean that for me, that's going to be one of the. I'm basically going to cheerlead for that. Mohegan is a recreational river area. Northwest Ohio is not, but I have really seen some beautiful stuff by just going on the other rivers, not the tourist trap, crowded. Like I said, we've went across almost the whole state of Ohio now. We got about 85 miles to go. We'll basically have ridden the water down both sides of the glacial divide and got to the Ohio River and the lake. Hopefully Labor Day weekend we'll be able to finish checking that box.
That's amazing.
But yeah, people will be amazed at how different. They don't have to go very far to feel like they've escaped. Mm-hmm. Nature is reconnecting with nature has been a big deal for me over the past few years. So I can't say enough how much I think everyone should go try it. Even if they just do go to like Mohegan and take the 5-mile trip, or
Yep.
That'll give them a taste.
Because and I mentioned to you the first time we talked, I've had some of the craziest sightings I have had are from people that were doing just what you were doing. We're going down the river, a Bigfoot or some other, whatever creature it was, is in the river, not paying any attention because it's not a very heavily traveled river. And the one guy claims to have bounced into because it didn't know he was coming up behind it. Now, when he woke up, he found himself up on the bank. So apparently what happened in between him hitting it and waking up, was something that most people don't want to have happen to. But that was the story. I'm like, holy smokes. But so I mean, I'm not encouraging people to go out and do kayaking at night for that very reason. But I mean, who knows what you're going to see, or not see.
I do think, and tactically, when we're out going through the woods, we know we're not going to sneak up on one of these. Mm-hmm. They're going to hear us coming from way off. I think if you're on the water, that's about the best chance you're ever going to have a surprise one. Mm-hmm. Coming around the bend in the river. Like, you said it. I've went miles and miles to not see human beings. And they're not expecting them to be there.
Mm-hmm. No, and think about it. They're around water for a reason, whether it's, to drink or to hunt, because every other animal needs to be around water at some point. And if they're preoccupied with taking care of their own needs, they're not gonna be paying attention to. So get out there on the river, put a GoPro on your head, on your front of your canoe, and the back of your canoe, and see what you see. So
yeah, I mean, in order for anyone to have an encounter, there has to be a person, there has to be a Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you put yourself out there, the better your chance of having that opportunity, I think. Nobody's going to have an encounter from the couch.
That also sounds like sound dating advice right there. So, well, Rob, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing, your thoughts on what's going on out there in the Bigfoot world in Ohio, and sharing that experience. Like I said, that's an intense experience. I'm glad that you shared that, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person at the Mohegan Bigfoot Festival, and hopefully people will come out and say hi and listen to what all we have to say. Although I can't top that experience that you just had, so maybe me and the judge will just bow out. So, but thank you so much. Hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you on the 20th.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it as well.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.
God only knows what's hiding.